Welcome in to the Ryan and Ryan Power Hour here on SportsTownChicago.com. I am Ryan Stuprich. Ryan Risky should be here any moment, but we are starting off the show today with our interview with Mark Grote, who is the Cubs pre- and post-game host on News Radio 780 WBBM. Hey, Mark, what's going on?
What's up, Ryan? How you guys doing, man?
I'm doing good, and I guess to start off, we'll talk about the Cubs game last night, as it ended in a very strange fashion, as David Ross threw out the runner at first base to end the game, and the Cubs won.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing because Hector Rondon, he was struggling out there, you know, and it had a feel. It was already a long night because of the rain delay. The Cubs were just holding on for dear life that entire contest against a Washington team which has been struggling but is still good. And you just had a bad feeling when there's runners on first and second. And, you know, Anthony Rendon in his first game back, and obviously one of the Nationals' best players. And the most amazing part about that play, the play that you just mentioned, David Ross picking off Clint Robinson.
Right.
At first, you see how I did that? That was pretty awesome. Let's think about what I just did there. That was good. And you know what? I think people can understand why I just did that. But anyway, David Ross, you know, to pick off Clint Robinson in the game. The most amazing part about that game, it was Anthony Rizzo who actually called for that pickoff there. It had nothing to do with Joe Madden. It had nothing to do with the pitcher. It had nothing to do with the catcher.
Right.
That was all Rizzo saying, you know what? This guy's sneaking off the base a little bit. Robinson, you know, let's try something here. And they did. And wow, what a relief that is to have a game end like that I fully thought was headed for extra innings.
Right, and those are the kind of games that good teams win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Cubs have had a very interesting year. I mean, I think they're now 15-10 in one-run games. So just the actual volume, where almost half of their games this year have been decided by one run. And, you know, you mentioned good teams. The Cubs have kind of had a strange year in that way, that they have played the really good teams, you know, very competitively, very well. They have won, whereas they've got that old problem where when they play the teams that are not so good, like the Milwaukee Brewers, having lost 2 series to that team, they don't play as well. So it's the old play up to, play down to the competition, which makes it really difficult to tell exactly what the Cubs are this year and what direction ultimately they will go before this 2015 season is all decided.
Right, and this is an important month with all the teams that made the playoffs last year on their schedule this month. And before Jorge Soler went on the DL, it looked like he was starting to heat up. I wanted to get your take about maybe if he was going to start hitting for more power as the season went on.
Yeah, no, I think so. You know, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was right. It wasn't like he was exploding or in like some really serious hot streak. You just see it, where he had to get a game-tying home run at one point in time. He started to go to right field a little bit more, which he was so adept at last season and in spring training this year. You know, a lot of people talked about the correlation with the weather getting warmer, because he more than anybody hated it, you know, during April when it was so cold. You could tell the way he was bundled up. But yeah, he was starting to kind of figure things out a little bit. You know, Joe Madden had slowly moved him down in the order, then he was coming back up in the order. So, yeah, I do think that he's going to get better, you know, as the season goes on. And it was funny, too, because we were talking to Manny Ramirez about Jorge Soler. You know, Manny's, you know, hitting consults for the Cubs. He's not in their clubhouse every day, but he's been on this road trip. And, you know, it was suggested to Manny, you know, some of these young guys like Soler who've never been through the, you know, sort of furious grind of a 162-game season, are they going to, you know, they're going to tail off, because it's a natural thing that can occur with young players, because it is a grind every day. And Manny said, no, he says, actually, he looks at it the opposite, that Jorge is going to adjust to these pitchers and figure them out as opposed to them figuring him out, and that he's actually going to get better, and you'll see full-fledged Jorge Soler. So once he gets back in the lineup, and who knows when that's going to be, he'll definitely be one to watch.
Now, how much do you think the offense is going to hurt now that Jorge Soler is going to be on the DL for at least 3 weeks? It could be more. It could be less, like you said. How much do you think the offense will hurt having his bat out of the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely affects things. There are more prominent guys in the lineup that if you lost, you would be more concerned probably at this point. But Jorge Soler is a guy that pitchers have to be aware of. He's a little bit of a mystery still to opposing pitchers. I mean, the guy is a monster at the plate. They know what he's capable. I mean, he's probably the strongest guy on the Cubs. So even if he hasn't had the season that people thought he was going to have, the potential still, every time that dude steps up to the plate, he could hit it farther than any player, that's on that diamond on a given day. So I think just for that reason, that you have to think about pitching to Jorge Soler, that it creates a big effect on this team.
Now, the trade deadline is kind of approaching, and left field had kind of been a position that the Cubs weren't getting very much production out of. I know Chris Coghlan is starting to heat up. Do you think the Cubs might look for an upgrade towards the trade deadline, or do you think that's kind of wait and see with Coghlan?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to get a read on Theo Epstein in terms of what he's going to do. He's giving all the ambiguous answers right now. Not going to tip his hand. He gives. We're always trying to improve. He has specifically addressed left field in that whole situation. But it's interesting to see what Junior Lake is doing out in the outfield right now. That he's got power and he's got extreme speed as well. And Coghlan, he's one of those guys too that if you really watch Chris Coghlan play every day or the times he gets in, he's been ripped off of hits more than anybody on this team, and maybe in baseball. I mean, he's hit so many balls so hard on a rope that I think it's a little bit unfair that it's sort of open season on Chris Coghlan all the time. And it's part of it too is that he's not one of the precious farm system guys, so he kind of gets pushed to the background as the expendable part of the Cubs. If they can improve in that, I'm sure they will, but I want to see kind of how things play out with Chris Coghlan and what they do with the pitching staff as well.
Tonight we have Tsuyoshi Wada, who has a 2.30 ERA against Tanner Roark, who is from Illinois. Who do you think is going to win this game tonight? And do you think Tsuyoshi Wada can continue his success and maybe go a little, maybe an extra, into the sixth inning, possibly?
Yeah. Tsuyoshi Wada in the very small sample size has been good. As you mentioned, they haven't really stretched him much, but, every game it feels like Joe Maddon's getting the clearance to and a little bit more comfortable leaving Wada out there. So, he's 19 strikeouts, 5 walks, .96 whip. So he's been, in again, the small sample size, Wada has been extremely effective, striking out a lot more guys than I thought he would. So he's been a little bit deceptive towards, opposing teams. So, he's due for a win. We saw Tanner Roark at Wrigley Field too. He's pretty good as well. He's got a 2.59 ERA if he's getting a chance to get a couple of spot starts in while Doug Fister is injured. It's a pretty good pitching match. I mean, this is obviously a rematch of the Wrigley Field one on May 25th. So, honestly, with the weather the way it is, kind of cold and dreary again out here in D.C., I expect another, sort of low-scoring affair and between Wada and Roark.
Yeah, Wada has actually been kind of a pleasant surprise because he seems that he's gotten a little better than last year, which he pitched very well last year. And if he continues to pitch like that, you might be rethinking what you do at the trade deadline in terms of acquiring a pitcher, because Kyle Hendricks has been pitching really well as of late.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that they still, if they had the right deal and they weren't giving up too much, I think that they still feel like they might be able to upgrade at the fifth spot. But for sure, Tsuyoshi Wada has been very good. And Kyle Hendricks, his last 3 starts, he has really figured things out. And if not for, one really big bases clearing double the other night in Miami, after he loaded the bases with nobody out, got the first 2 men out, only to be foiled by a bases clearing double. He's looking at 3 straight really brilliant performances. But yeah, I was worried about Kyle Hendricks because you kind of wondered, was last season, was he just sneaking up on hitters because he doesn't have the stuff that blows you away? And sometimes you watch Kyle Hendricks, even last year, like, how is this guy getting people out? And then this year, with a really slow start, you thought, well, maybe he's not what we thought he was, but he is, because the guy works his butt off in terms of studying and just being a legitimately smart pitcher. So I really like watching Kyle Hendricks work. And Wada, I'll just say I'm intrigued by him. I don't know that he's the answer as the fifth man in a playoff roster or a playoff team, but I'm watching. I'm intrigued, and we'll see.
Now, what do you think that the Cubs will do once interleague play starts? My opinion is it's too unrealistic to promote Kyle Schwarber from Double-A in his first full professional season. I know Javier Baez is a name that comes to mind. I want to get your take.
Yeah, those are definitely, I've thrown those out there with some of the stuff that I've written. Those cannot be ruled out, and Joe Maddon straight up said that everything is on the table. It's looking more and more like we might see a Chris Denorfia situation. He just made his first rehab start yesterday, and he's probably on track to get a call and to be added to the roster when the Cubs go to Detroit here in a couple of days. I agree with you on Schwarber. I would say I would almost, if I had to check yes or no, I would say no on Schwarber. I wouldn't mind seeing Javier Baez, though. He's working at third base. You don't have to put him in defensively. Have him be your DH for literally for 2 games in Detroit, and let him take some of his big swings and see what happens. That's what I would like to see. I think the realistic option is going to be Chris Denorfia, though.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think having Denorfia there for a couple games to get his groove back, I think that would be really good too. And also, Miguel Montero hasn't played in a couple games. Do you think we will see him at some point, either tonight or later on in the series against the Nationals?
Yeah, I'd be really surprised if he wasn't starting tonight, actually. Dave Ross has had a few days in there now. So yeah. I think unless there's something wrong with Montero that we've not been told, I would be really shocked if he wasn't out there tonight. So, he's still your number one catcher, hands down. Joe Maddon he's very aware of catching and catchers and all that stuff. So he doesn't want Miguel Montero in game 131 to be tired and worn down because he's such a valuable piece to the Cubs.
Now, I was actually kind of wondering this myself. Do you think that at any point later this season or next season, potentially, I know that's a little far ahead, that the Cubs could go back to the 3-catcher system? Because it seemed like it was working really well, as you say, keeping Miguel Montero a little more fresh. And one name that I was looking at that could be on the trade market is a Dioner Navarro, who's a former Cub and could hit really well and play pretty solid defense. So do you think that if he's available, the Cubs could go after him to try to get another third catcher? And he was a good pinch hitter, because I read their pinch hitters are batting 172 this year. Yeah.
No, I like that. I like Dioner Navarro, too. He was a good backup when he was here, too, and had a couple of big moments. So I kind of like the way you're thinking. But I think at this point, they admitted that having 3 catchers when they did, it was more of a luxury than a necessity. My guess is if they have the point where they can add on or beef up, it's going to be in the bullpen as opposed to, a third catcher or another bench player. At this point, the bullpen is still a work in progress. I think Joe Maddon is still, that's still the biggest part of his job every day, is seeing who is available in that bullpen, who he can trust in high leverage situations. So I think that if you're going to see additions to this team in terms of where you can bulk up and where you have the luxury of adding, it's going to be in the bullpen.
Speaking of and speaking of that, Neil Ramirez has been sort of progressing along. When do you think we could see him back in the bullpen?